So anyway, I am reading now. Okay. This is from Nietzsche, Beyond Good and Evil. Aphorism 208. Our Europe today, I'm reading now. Our Europe today, the scene of an insanely sudden attempt at a radical mixing of classes and consequently of races, is as a result skeptical in all heights and depths. Sometimes with that flexible skepticism which leaps impatiently and greedily from one branch to another. Sometimes gloomy like a cloud overloaded with question marks, and often sick to death of its will. Paralysis of the will. Where nowadays do we not find this cripple sitting? And often how well dressed is such a seductive outfit. This illness has the most beautifully splendid and deceitful clothing. For example, most of what presents itself in the display windows today as objectivity, the practice of science, art for art's sake, purely disinterested knowledge, is only dressed up skepticism and paralysis of the will. I'll stand by this diagnosis of the European disease. The sickness of the will has spread unevenly across Europe. It appears in its greatest and most varied forms where the culture has already been indigenous for the longest time, and it disappears to the extent that the barbarian still or again achieves his rights under the baggy clothing of Western culture. Isn't that nice? Anyway, thus, in contemporary France, we can conclude as easily as we can grasp it in our hands that the will is most seriously ill, and France, which has always had a masterful skill in transforming even the fateful changes in its spirit into something attractive and seductive, it truly displays its cultural dominance over Europe today as the school and exhibition hall for all the charms of skepticism. The power to will, and indeed to desire a will that lasts a long time, is already somewhat stronger in Germany, and in the north of Germany even more so than in the middle, but it's significantly stronger in England, Spain, and Corsica. In Germany, it's bound up with apathy, and in those other places with hard heads, to say nothing of Italy, which is too young to know yet what it wants, and which must first demonstrate whether it can will. But it's strongest, the will is strongest and most amazing in that immense empire in between, where Europe, so to speak, flows back into Asia, that is, in Russia. There, the power to will has for a long time lain dormant and built up. There the will waits menacingly, uncertain whether, to borrow a favorite phrase from our physicists today, uncertain whether it will be discharged as a will to negate or a will to affirm. It may require more than wars in India and developments in Asia for Europe to be relieved of its greatest danger. It will require inner revolutions too, the breaking up of the empire into small bodies, and above all the introduction of the parliamentary nonsense, along with every man's duty to read his newspaper at breakfast. He's saying it may require all this to dissipate Russia's will. I'm not saying this because it's what I want. The opposite would be closer to my heart. I mean, such an increase in the Russian danger that Europe would have to decide to become equally a threat. That is, it would have to acquire a will by means of a new caste which would rule Europe, a long, fearful, individual will, which could set itself goals for thousands of years from now. So that finally the long spun out comedy of its small states, together with its multiple dynastic and democratic wills, would come to an end. The time for petty politics is over. The next century is already bringing on the battle for mastery of the earth, the compulsion to grand politics. End quote. Yes,